How do the polls shake out for 2020 versus where they were at this time in 2016? Team Rising is standing by ready to analyze.
That's right. Back with us, Republican strategist, fellow with the National Security Institute, Lauren Claffey, and Democratic strategist, founding partner of Northern Star Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins himself. Welcome back, guys. It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start a little bit with these polls. This is something, an ever-present question here on Rising, is the polls, a month and a half ago, it was like Biden up by 14. They're like, oh my God. Now tightening, not dramatically, but still tightening themselves. Kyle Kondik has some interesting analysis, who also a great friend of our show. Some takeaways here. There is more party unity this time. Biden is doing better with independents and HRC, and major parties are attracting more support overall, so it doesn't necessarily cut both ways. Michael, we'll start with you. Whenever we're looking at this polling, are you comfortable with the Biden position? Because I also still see some echoes of 2016 when you start to dig into some of the deeper numbers.
What this says to me is we're in a flip scenario from 2016. Hillary Clinton was the candidate that a lot of Democrats felt like they had to hold their nose and vote for, and Donald Trump was the alternative. I think now what we're seeing is Donald Trump is the candidate that a lot of Republicans have to hold their nose for, and Joe Biden is the alternative. He's someone that a lot of people may not be voting for, but they're voting against Donald Trump. And it worked in 2016, and it looks like it'll work in 2020.
Yeah, Lauren, that's actually a dynamic that we've been following here, too, is in 2016, the people who said they hated both of the candidates, they largely went to Trump. This time around, the people who say, I don't really like either of these people, they are largely going to Biden. And I think that's actually an important and critical constituency here when you have so much division and so much sort of disgust with what's going on in Washington. That graph that we showed, the margins between the polls for Hillary on the eve of her convention versus Biden on the eve of his, a lot of those margins were fairly similar. However, Biden seems to clear that 50% threshold more easily, and there are fewer people that seem to be drawn to any of the third party or independent candidates. So what's kind of your assessment of where things are and whether Trump has a chance to pull off a comeback here?
Yeah, I think Trump is being heavily affected by the coronavirus and the economic depression that we're in right now. And so I think a lot of this is going to be dependent on where we are come November, if there's a vaccine, if his administration starts producing a little bit more better response, any of those types of things. Because a lot of these polls, too, the people that would normally be very interested in Trump and had given him the benefit of the doubt, for example, the over 65 crowd, that is depressed in all of these polling. I also think that I'm always very skeptical of national polls generally, because a lot of the Republicans that I talk to when I'm out on the campaign trail or other things, they don't want to answer the phone to pollsters. They don't participate in polls. And those are your more of your Republicans or your independents or your swing voters, I should say. So right. I always like to give it a little bit more of a cushion on the Republican side because of so much of the distrust towards national pollsters that they have.
I think you're actually right on that. That's why we also like to focus here on state polls. We have a Pennsylvania poll. Let's throw that up there on the screen, which is about a 4-point margin actually for Biden. So still, however, Michael, within the margin of error, 49 to 45, so a 5-point margin. However, within the margin of error for this poll out of Pennsylvania, I saw some Democrats that were actually a bit concerned about that. The president was actually in Pennsylvania yesterday, not actually spouting his normal, Biden is a Trojan horse for socialism attack, but kind of returning a little bit, at least in this one particular speech, some of the themes that won him the 2016 campaign. Do you think Biden is vulnerable to that in Pennsylvania and with the polling right around the same mark where it was for Hillary back in 2016?
Well, I think Republicans are running into two issues. One, early voting starts in a couple weeks.
That's
so
right.
People are going to start sending their ballots in, and this will be baked in. And the second problem is every argument that Trump makes, he then makes the counter argument to a different crowd. So to some people, he says Joe Biden is a socialist, and to other people, he says that Joe Biden is going to abandon progressives and you can't trust him. So the inconsistency in messaging is making it so that nothing is sticking.
Yeah,
I think that's right. I mean, Lauren, what do you think that Trump, look, he can hope for a vaccine, he can hope that things change, But what do you think that he could do even just at the convention next week to try to turn things around? Because, yes, I think anyone would say, and we can throw the 538 numbers up there, Biden is the odds-on favorite to win at this point, although last time around, the odds of Trump winning were relatively similar to what this projection has right here, and he ends up pulling it off. So he still has a shot. We should be really clear. But what would you suggest that he does to try to start winning back some of those suburban voters, especially who have strayed from him?
I think one thing that you see pretty consistently is that people like Joe Biden. They think he's a decent guy. Pennsylvania is a really great example. It's, where he was born and grew up. And people like him. They think he's a really great, wonderful guy. So any attacks on that are not really going to stick. However, what you do see sticking is any attacks or comparisons of the Democratic Party moving to more of a socialist program. That really freaks people out. And so I think what you'll see next week is if you decouple Biden from what the rest of the Democratic Party is, Biden may be a nice guy, but he's going to bring a lot of socialists into government and more central government planning and higher taxes and all of these things that you do not want. We may become Venezuela, as extreme as that sounds. That type of messaging works really well with voters because that's what they're more scared of. They like Biden, but they're scared with what an administration or a Democratic Congress will come with it.
So I want to press you on that because I've been very critical of that strategy. I have not seen any polling which indicates that voters believe, even if you accept that it is true, which I think my Democratic Socialist colleague would say is not. I have not seen any public polling whatsoever to indicate that voters believe that attack. They say no. They actually view Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as more moderate than President Trump and Vice President Pence. And again, you can argue all you want, but if the voters don't believe that, trying to make that case doesn't seem all that effective with only 75 days, Lauren. And so I just want to press you a bit on that. I actually think, and you can respond to this, I think it has to do with coronavirus. 65% of the American public is upset with how Trump has handled the coronavirus. The majority of them strongly disapprove of that. I think it all just comes down to if he took the virus a lot more seriously and declared some national plan of action, he'd have a much better shot at the election. I don't even think socialism has anything to do with it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Coronavirus and economy are the two things that are at the top of the poll, but you're kind of making my point. You have to decouple how people feel about Biden and Kamala and how they feel about the rest of the Democratic Party in order to make any gains in this election, because you're not going to be able to paint them as extreme. People have good feelings about them. You really have to focus on what their administration will look like. Who's the Secretary of Education? What's Nancy Pelosi going to be pushing through at that time? What is AOC going to be doing? That's what people react to.
They barely let AOC have it 60 seconds, Michael. Right. Listen, obviously I do not view Joe Biden as a Trojan horse for socialism. If I did, I'd be a lot more excited about this campaign. But respond to Lauren. Do you think that attack lands whatsoever? It's basically the same attack that Republicans try to launch against every single Democratic president, no matter what, in every single election.
Yeah, at the end of the day, what you're looking at is almost 200,000 Americans who aren't going to be at the Thanksgiving table this year. And that is the most devastating statistic in terms of the Trump presidency. The economy, all the other things are important, but dead Americans are the statistic that are going to sink his campaign. And we're now, 8 months into this and there's still no plan. And so even people down in Florida at the villages who want to be for Trump are scared because, one, they can't see their family. 2, they have a governor who hasn't adequately responded. And 3, they have no idea what tomorrow is going to look like.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about, I'm not sure America will ever forgive for what happened in February, but we'll see whenever November comes. Thank you guys. We missed you so much. Good to see you.
So great to see you
Miss
both,
you
guys.
Thank you.
Next on Rising, if you haven't heard by now, former Trump chief strategist Steve Bannon has been arrested. We're going to talk about that when Rising continues.